Bryan Kohberger, the so-called killer, has filed a motion asking the judge to throw out the indictment against him.
And there's no direct evidence linking him other than that transferred DNA on the sheath.
We kick things off this evening in Idaho, where earlier this year the legislature voted to authorize the firing squad as a form of execution.
The idea, as I stated already, isn't complete 100%, oh, it's Bryan Kohberger. The white Elantra can't be determined to be his white Elantra.
That new law went into effect on July 1st and makes death by firing squad an option if lethal drugs are unavailable. And of course, prosecutors are pursuing the death penalty against accused killer Bryan Kohberger.
They're not letting all of this information out. They don't want it told.
Now, while Kohberger was charged before the new law went into effect, it is still possible that he could face this form of execution. So that is important to know. Now, today, Bryan Kohberger is in court and still in court right now at this hour for his motions hearing. Also in the courtroom, family members of Kaylee Gonzalez, one of those slain college students. Now, one family member today could be seen wearing a T-shirt reading "Justice for Kaylee." Idaho House Bill 186, shots fired.
People that have been in power for all these years, it's going to be some more deaths in Idaho. And you know why? It's called shut down. Shut your mouth.
Wow.
That's what it's called. Shut your mouth. And Kaylee and Maddie got in trouble because they were running their mouth.
Like, did they see something they weren't supposed to see, or you know what I mean? That's the thing.
Well, see, what has happened is when you live in a place for 2 years and you be around certain people and things, you learn and find out things.
You're right about that.
And the people that are around here that know, as I said, this half of these young adults are scared to death. They scared to talk. But, as I said, they got the gag order because they don't want you talking. They do not want them. What happens when you communicate? You find out things, don't you?
That has to do with other DNA profiles found at the scene. They have provided full discovery for the sheath, the DNA found on the knife sheath, but not the other 3 unidentified male DNA samples, 2 from within the house, 1 from outside of the house.
Your Honor, we didn't realize this was going to be an issue today. We have given the defense everything that we received from the lab. They'd asked for DNA workups on other people. To the extent that they don't have them, they weren't done. We can't produce something that doesn't exist.
So the defense here using this witness to establish the point that they want to know whose DNA this is. Who are these 3 unidentified males whose DNA was there at the house? And then on the contrary position, the state is saying, well, we can't just put the DNA of these individuals into the CODIS system that's used in our criminal justice system. These individuals would be ineligible, is what the state is saying.
Aspect of it. If they have the swab and the swab matches what they found on the sheath, then who cares about the genealogy aspect of it? You want to throw it out? Fine. It wasn't the only thing we had that we were looking at him for, because we had the car, we had other stuff. But on the DNA part, fine. You don't like the genealogy, it doesn't matter. We got it the regular.
Because the defense is going to deconstruct everything that's happened. First of all, they're going to talk about the car. They're going to say, no, first time they had the car, they had the wrong year.
Development tonight in the murder of 4 college students in Idaho. Detectives want to speak to the driver of a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra with unknown license plate. They say the occupants of the car may have critical information regarding the case.
They then went and reverse engineered it. Second, when they got to the sheath, they didn't have any exemplar or anything. It didn't. They ran it through. It didn't come back with a hit. The only way they got to the hit was, the defense will argue, an unreliable, unsanctified, if you will, or unsanctioned scientific methodology that doesn't pass muster. And then they may arguably do a motion to exclude based on that.
Presence of a DNA profile doesn't tell us anything about the time frame or the circumstances under which that DNA came to be on the evidence sample.
And it's easier than you might think for one of these tiny particles to transfer.
I have two different kinds of sweetener here. I got sugar and an artificial sweetener. And I think what we can do is just show how the transfer could take place. Let me hand you the actual sugar, and I've got here a sweetener. If we just rip them open, right, I'm going to put some of my sweetener on my hand. Full gram with a sweetener. So I got a pretty sweet hand right now, right?
Mine's all naturally sweet.
Yeah, so the thing is that it's not going to be at all surprising if at this point we shake hands, right? And we come away, and I got a lot of sugar on my hand, right?
Here.
You got a lot of sugar on your hand, right? If we were now to take our hands and pick something up, like a water bottle, for instance, would you be surprised if when I put the water bottle down, we look and we find some sugar grains on that, right? I think that's entirely reasonable.
That's frightening. My DNA, the sugar, is on that water bottle, even though I didn't touch it. It transferred when we shook hands. And it gets even scarier. What if we never even touched?
If I grabbed a purse the way that Daniel did when he was rifling through his 17-year-old accusers, and I pick up an object, and if I handed it back to you,
Sure.
what would be on it?
Interestingly, all that I see is sugar. I don't see any of the artificial sweetener, but I don't think it's at all remarkable that we would find some of that sugar on this article. And if I were to handle the article now, what we may find is the sugar's gone and it's on my hand. None of the artificial sweetener is on my hand that I can see, but I've got some sugar on my hand, and if I were to rub my shirt, the sugar's gone. It's on my shirt. If we did a DNA test, we might find only your DNA and none of mine from that transfer that we've just done.
His trial date and his speedy trial right. Your Honor, we're here today to ask the court to continue the trial setting, and Mr. Kohberger is prepared to waive his right to a speedy trial.
Counselor Garagos, why would he waive speedy trial?
Well, first of all, they've got to do, and they've already started, a parallel investigation. This is a death penalty case. The last thing you want to do is rush into that. I know a lot of times there's some people who think that it's a good idea that the prosecution isn't ready. They're behind the eight ball. I don't believe that. I think.
But somebody isn't communicating. There's nothing being released. It seems like they're trying to suppress the story.
They're not letting all of this information out. They don't want it told.
We want to put rewards out there, like, don't do that. Yeah, I get it. Your town doesn't want to have reward posters posted all over when you come and you do your rush. You're not going to get a lot of students if they see those things.
4 University of Idaho students were murdered at on November 13th. Won't be demolished until after October. Originally, the University of Idaho was going to destroy the home before the beginning of the school year. But today we find out that they are postponing this. The president of the University of Idaho, Scott Green, said, "We know that every action and decision around this horrific incident is painful and invokes emotions. That is why every decision we have made this far is with the families of the victims and our students in mind. While we look forward to removing this grim reminder of this tragedy, we feel holding until October is the right thing to do."
You're telling me the University of Idaho is going to demolish the house prior to the trial against Kohberger even beginning? A few months after the tragic incident took place, the University of Idaho actually got the home, and now they own it.
A judge has denied a motion to pause Bryan Kohberger's trial, meaning it is expected to start in early October. Kohberger returned to court today. His attorneys had hoped that the judge would pause court proceedings over concerns they had with his grand jury indictment. He is charged in the deaths of 4 University of Idaho students last year. Kohberger's team also argued for more access to DNA evidence, but prosecutors said they've given the defense all the evidence they have.
We have made it very clear to the University of Idaho that we do not want that house to be demolished. and they are ignoring us completely. And when I say ignoring them, us, I mean that they respond and they say, okay, yeah, we understand what you're saying, but basically tough cookie. We're going to go ahead forward with it because they say that it's for the good of the community and good for the University of Idaho. It's not. It's not the good for the community. It may be good for the University of Idaho for everyone to hurry up and forget that there was a murder. Everyone to hurry up and forget that there was a murder.
They're trying to suppress the story.
Everyone to hurry up and forget that there was a murder.
They're trying to suppress the story.
The Cornudo family, the Mogan family, and the Gonzalez family do not want that house to be demolished, and they're moving forward anyway. They just don't really care. It's always been a little bit of a hurry up and grieve.
Bryan Kohberger, the so-called killer, has filed a motion asking the judge to throw out the indictment against him. His attorney says the indictment should be dismissed on the grounds of biased grand jury, inadmissible evidence, lack of sufficient evidence, and here's the big one, prosecutorial misconduct by withholding exculpatory evidence. By withholding exculpatory evidence.
Mogan, from which she died, in violation of Idaho Code 18-4001, 4002, 4003, and 4004. The maximum penalty for this offense, if you were to plead guilty or be found guilty, is death or imprisonment for life. Do you understand?
Yes.
Penalty for this offense.
Why would Bryan Kohberger's attorney elect to skip a preliminary hearing? There are several reasons this will be done, whether it's to delay the trial to gather evidence or information not being available at the current time. Bryan's attorney requested the discovery evidence from the state, which will give her access to all of the state's evidence beforehand, possibly prevent the case from going to trial if they have a compelling defense. The request for discovery also includes exculpatory evidence, which is evidence that may actually benefit Bryan. I think that the evidence that they have now is all circumstantial. Once the evidence testing come back from the stains that they found in his search warrant, then I'll have a full conclusion. As far as we know now, this is all circumstantial evidence and independently can be debunked.
The DNA situation, like the fact that we have a fruit of the poisonous tree scenario bubbling around in the background because the information that they got was illegally obtained through using databases that law enforcement shouldn't have legally have access to, and so on and so forth. And that's why they don't want to give any of the information over. But that's just me spitballing. That's just what I believe is a potential. This motion is based on the state's various violations during the grand jury proceedings.
That's the same day the accused killer was in a court for a hearing where he waived his right to a speedy trial. That means his October 2nd trial date now postponed. Obviously, we're going to have much more on this development tomorrow night as we go through the papers. We'll do it right here on Closing Argument.